I still remember the sterile smell of the university's administration office, the way the fluorescent lights hummed as I held the withdrawal form with trembling hands. My mother's voice echoed in my head. She comes first. Give it up and support her. It's your responsibility as the older sister. The words hadn't made sense at the time. Not really. I had always been the obedient one, the one who kept her head down and did what was expected. But this, giving up my dream for someone who didn't even want me there, that wasn't just obedience. That was erasure. The pen felt heavy in my hand. Mrs. Thompson, the admin clerk with kind eyes and graying hair, watched me from across her desk. I'd seen her many times before, during registration, when I changed my minor, even that time I desperately needed an extension on my tuition payment. She knew me as the quiet girl who always had her paperwork in order, who never caused problems. Now she was watching me throw it all away. "Are you sure about this, Eliza?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. "You're so close to finishing. Less than 4 months, and you'd have your degree." I nodded, unable to look her in the eyes. How could I explain that this wasn't my choice? That the night before, my parents had sat me down at our kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg that Dad kept promising to fix, and laid out the family's financial reality in stark terms. Daniela got accepted to Boston University's pre-med program, Mom had said, pride evident in her voice despite the serious conversation. It's what she's always wanted. I had smiled then, genuinely happy for my sister. Daniela was brilliant, impulsive and sometimes self-centered, but undeniably smart. She deserved this opportunity. "That's amazing," I'd said. "When does she start?" "Next semester," Dad replied, his expression tightening. "But we have a problem, Eliza." The problem, as it turned out, was money. It had always been money in our family. Stretching paychecks, clipping coupons, working overtime. Mom's job as a nurse and Dad's position at the manufacturing plant had gotten us by, but there had never been extra. No college fund, no savings, just day-to-day survival with occasional splurges on birthdays. "We can only afford to support one of you in school right now," Mom had continued, not meeting my eyes. "And medical school. It's her dream. It's important." "As if environmental science isn't important," I had countered, feeling a rare flash of defiance. "I'm studying how to protect our planet. That matters too." Dad had shaken his head. "Of course it matters, but be realistic. Daniela has a chance to become a doctor. Think of what that means for her future, for all our futures." I knew what he was implying. Doctors made money, real money, the kind that could lift a family like ours out of the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. My career path, working with conservation teams or environmental agencies, wouldn't do that, at least not right away. "I'm only 1 semester away from graduation," I had pleaded. "Can't she wait just a few months? Then I can work full-time and help pay. The scholarship she got is only valid if she starts immediately." Mom had cut in. "If she defers, she loses it. And who knows if she'd get in again." I was stunned into silence. They had already made up their minds. The family had placed its bets, and they weren't on me. As I stood in the administration office the next day, I thought about how Daniela had reacted when I confronted her later that night. I'd gone to her room, thinking surely she'd feel some guilt, some recognition of what was being asked of me. "Did you know?" I had asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I stood in her doorway. Her room was cluttered with half-packed boxes, medical textbooks she'd bought secondhand already stacked on her desk. "Did you know they were going to ask me to drop out?" Daniela had looked up from her phone, annoyed at the interruption. "It's not like you were doing anything revolutionary with your life, Eliza. Tree hugging isn't exactly a career. Environmental science is a legitimate field," I'd said, hurt blooming in my chest. "And I've worked hard," she had sighed, finally putting her phone down. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? But someone like you shouldn't even be in college. Ha ha. You're the responsible one, the one who takes care of everyone else. That's your thing. I'm the one with the big dreams." That laugh, that casual, ha ha, tacked onto her dismissal of my entire future, cut deeper than anything else. It confirmed what I had always suspected. In our family narrative, I was the supporting character, not the protagonist. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, snapping back to the present moment in the admin office. I don't have a choice. She frowned, sliding the form closer. There are emergency loans, payment plans. We could talk to the financial aid office. It's not just about money, I interrupted, though of course it was entirely about money. It was just that the money had been allocated to someone else. It's a family situation. I need to withdraw. I signed my name at the bottom of the form, each letter a small burial of hope. As Mrs. Thompson processed my withdrawal, I stared at the bulletin board behind her desk, covered with flyers for career fairs, internship opportunities, and graduation announcements. One caught my eye. Environmental science graduates in high demand. It felt like a cruel joke. You'll get a partial refund for the semester, Mrs. Thompson explained, her voice now professional but still tinged with disappointment. It will be processed in about 2 weeks. I nodded, knowing that money would go straight to Daniela's first semester expenses. As I stood to leave, Mrs. Thompson handed me a business card. If you change your mind, she said quietly, call me directly. I'll expedite your re-enrollment. Your spot in the program won't be filled immediately. I took the card, tucking it into my wallet, though I knew I couldn't use it. As I walked out of the administration building for what I thought was the last time, autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet. Students rushed past me, laughing, arguing, living lives that were still on track. I avoided the environmental sciences building, taking the long way around campus to the bus stop. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Did you do it? Daniela needs to confirm her housing by 3 p.m. No, a thank you. No acknowledgement of what this day meant to me. Just the next task in supporting my sister's future while burying my own. I typed yes and hit send, then turned my phone off completely. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Not now. Maybe not ever again. The bus came, and I stepped on, not looking back at the campus that had been my home, my purpose, my future. I was 22 years old, and already my life felt over. Life at home after leaving college was a slow decay of spirit. My parents praised Daniela's every move, admiring her white coat from the brochures, and talking endlessly about how proud they were. Meanwhile, I picked up extra shifts at a local bookstore, helping pay for her textbooks, transport, even her lab fees. No one thanked me. No one even acknowledged the sacrifice. This Boston weather is brutal, Daniela complained during one of her weekly video calls. Mom and Dad huddled around the kitchen laptop, hanging on her every word as if she were broadcasting from Mars instead of 4 hours away. I need better winter boots. The cheap ones are already leaking. We'll send you money, honey, Mom said immediately. Eliza just got paid yesterday. I looked up from the corner of the kitchen where I was making a sandwich for my night shift. They hadn't even asked me. My paycheck, my meager earnings from 40 hours of shelving books, helping customers, and closing the store alone at night, was apparently communal property. I need that money for rent, I said quietly. Dad turned to me with a frown. You live here. You don't pay rent. I meant my portion of the bills, I clarified. The electric bill just came, and I said I'd cover it this month. Mom waved her hand dismissively. We'll figure that out later. Daniela needs boots now. From the screen, my sister gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thanks, sis. You're the best. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I wrapped my sandwich in plastic wrap, grabbed my coat, and left for work without another word. They probably didn't even notice. The walk to Fordham Books was the only peace I got most days. The store sat at the edge of town, a small independent shop that somehow survived despite the Barnes & Noble that had opened at the mall last year. The owner, Mr. Fordham, was in his 70s and increasingly relied on me to manage the place. He paid barely above minimum wage, but he let me read during slow periods and occasionally gave me damaged books that couldn't be sold. You look like someone ran over your cat, he observed as I entered the store that evening, flipping the sign to open as the afternoon shift worker left. Don't have a cat, I replied, hanging my coat on the rack behind the counter. Figure of speech. Eliza, something's eating at you. I shrugged, not wanting to get into it. How could I explain that I was watching my life slip away one shift at a time? That every dollar I earned went to someone else's dream while mine collected dust. Just tired, I said. Mr. Fordham didn't push it. That was one thing I appreciated about him. He knew when to back off, unlike my family, who never seemed to consider that I might have feelings worth respecting. The evening dragged on, a few customers wandering in to browse, but none buying much. I restocked the mystery section, dusted the classics, and eventually settled in with an inventory list. Around 9, I took my break and sat in the small staff room, unwrapping my sandwich from home. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Emily, my former lab partner. "Miss you at the field research site. We're cataloging the effects of the mill runoff on local amphibian populations. Thought you'd want to see the preliminary data. Hope you're doing well, wherever you are." Attached was a spreadsheet and several photos of frogs with abnormal developments. My heart ached. This should have been my work too. I had helped design this study, spent hours discussing methodology with our professor. Now I was outside of it all, watching from the sidelines as others completed what I had helped start. I closed the email without responding. What could I say? "Sorry I disappeared. My family decided my education wasn't worth investing in. Can't join you because I'm too busy funding my sister's dream while mine dies." Nothing sounded right, and everything revealed too much. The bookstore closed at 10. I counted the till, swept the floors, and locked up by 10:30. The walk home was darker and colder than the walk there had been. November in Connecticut was already showing its teeth, and my jacket wasn't quite warm enough. I thought of Daniela's boots, of the money that would leave my account tomorrow to buy them. My toes were cold in my own worn shoes, but that didn't seem to matter to anyone. Home was dark when I arrived. Mom and Dad had already gone to bed. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Sent Daniela $200 for boots. We'll need another $50 from you for shipping. Love, Mom." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Love, as if that word could cover everything they were taking from me. My bedroom was the same one I'd had since childhood. The walls were still pale blue. I'd painted them myself in high school, and my old desk sat under the window, now covered with bills and job applications rather than textbooks and research papers. I'd been applying to environmental agencies, wildlife preserves, anywhere that might give me a foot in the door without a completed degree. So far, nothing had come through. I changed into my pajamas and sat on the edge of my bed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. I was emotionally drained, spiritually empty. This wasn't living. It was existing, surviving. And for what? So Daniela could thrive while I withered. I spent most nights crying silently in the bathroom, brushing my tears away before stepping out so no one would see. I had become a background character in my own life, a worker, a wallet, a shadow. The worst part was that Daniela barely spoke to me, except to complain when I got her something later than she wanted. That night was no different. I locked myself in the bathroom, sat on the closed toilet lid, and let myself break down. Quiet sobs shook my shoulders as I pressed a towel to my face to muffle the sound. Through the thin walls, I could hear my father's snoring, steady and oblivious. They were all oblivious, or worse. They knew and didn't care. My phone vibrated again. A text from Ryan, an old classmate. "Hey stranger, some of us are getting together this weekend to celebrate Maria finishing her thesis. Want to join?" I stared at the message, remembering how it used to feel to belong somewhere. These were my people, the ones who understood the excitement of discovering a new species in our research area, who would stay up all night debating the ethics of conservation priorities. They had been my tribe, and I had left them without a proper goodbye. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on a simple lie. "Can't make it. Working extra shifts. Tell everyone hi from me." My old friends from college had reached out at first, confused about my sudden disappearance. I lied to all of them. I said I needed a break, that I was reevaluating my life, but the truth was too humiliating to share. Over time, the messages dwindled. I was alone, invisible, existing, but no longer living. After washing my face with cold water to reduce the redness around my eyes, I slipped back to my room. On my desk sat a small potted plant, a cutting from the research greenhouse that Professor Martinez had given me when I showed interest in propagation techniques. Somehow, despite my neglect, it had survived. Its small green leaves reached toward my window, stubborn in their will to live. I touched one of the leaves gently. "At least one of us is growing," I whispered. I tried to tell myself that this would pass, that maybe I'd find another path, but it was hard to believe in anything while living in the margins. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Winter settled over our town like a heavy blanket, and I moved through it like a ghost, working, sleeping, paying Daniela's bills, existing without purpose. Christmas came, and Daniela returned home triumphant with stories of professors who adored her, friends who were literally the best people ever, and classes that were tough, but so worth it. Mom and Dad hung on every word, serving her favorite foods, asking for details about every exam and social event. "And what about you, Eliza?" Daniela asked on Christmas Eve, as if suddenly remembering I existed. "How's the bookstore?" "It's fine," I replied, knowing no one at the table actually cared about the answer. "She might become manager soon," Mom said, though I had never mentioned any such possibility. "Right, Eliza?" I nodded, not having the energy to correct her. Let them believe what they wanted. Let them create this narrative where I was happy in my reduced life, content to be the supporting character in the family story. It was easier than fighting for recognition that would never come. New Year's arrived, and with it, more bills for Daniela's spring semester. Each one felt like another link in the chain that bound me to this half-life. I wondered how long it would last, how many years I would spend funding her education before I was allowed to reclaim my own path. The answer, whispered by my darker thoughts in the depth of night, was terrifying. Maybe never. Maybe this was just who I was now. The sister who sacrificed, the daughter who gave up, the one who faded away. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. Sunday was my only day off from the bookstore, and I'd planned to spend it applying for a position at the local parks department. A job that didn't require a completed degree, but at least touched on my field of interest. The application had been open on my laptop for 3 hours, and I'd written exactly 2 sentences of my cover letter. Motivation was hard to find these days. The phone kept ringing, its shrill tone cutting through the empty house. Mom and Dad had gone to church, something I'd stopped attending months ago. My excuses about work schedules had eventually given way to the truth. I couldn't bear to sit in a pew and hear sermons about family and sacrifice while mine took everything I had. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a small spark of warmth. Abuela, my grandmother on my mother's side, who lived in Arizona since retiring there 5 years ago. Unlike my parents, she always asked about me first when she called, wanted to know what I was reading, how I was really doing. "Hola, abuela," I answered, trying to infuse my voice with an energy I didn't feel. "Eliza, mi querida." Her voice, warm and trembling with concern, broke through the numbness that had clouded me for months. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your mother says you're always working or sleeping." "Sorry. Things have been busy," I said, the lie coming easily after months of practice. "How are you feeling? How's your arthritis?" "Better some days, worse others. The desert heat helps." She paused, and I could hear her breathing on the other end. But I didn't call to talk about my old bones. I called about you. "I'm fine, abuela." Another automatic response, another lie. "No, you're not. And I think I know why." Her voice had taken on an edge I rarely heard. "Eliza, why didn't you use the money I've been sending you, querida? I've been depositing your tuition every semester, all these years." At first, I thought I had misheard her. The words made no sense, like she was speaking a language I almost but not quite understood. "What money?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "The tuition money, mi vida, $5,000, every semester since you started college, into the account we set up when you graduated high school. The one linked to your university payments?" My heart stopped, then raced. I fumbled for my laptop, nearly knocking it off the desk in my haste. My fingers trembled as I navigated to my bank's website, entering the credentials for an account I hadn't checked in months. Not since I'd withdrawn from school and transferred the remaining balance to help pay for Daniela's first semester. "Abuela, I never knew about any deposits from you. Are you sure it was my account?" "Of course I'm sure," she said, a hint of indignation in her voice. "When your abuelo died, he left money specifically for your education. I've been sending it as we agreed, a little each semester so you would always have what you needed. Your mother promised to tell you." I stared at the screen as my account loaded. There it was, a section labeled Transaction History. I scrolled back month after month, then year after year, and there they were, regular as clockwork, deposits labeled "From Abuela" that had never been touched, thousands of dollars, enough to finish my degree, enough to reclaim my life. "I see them," I said, my voice cracking as the truth crashed over me. "But Abuela, I never knew. Mom and Dad made me leave school to support Daniela. They said we couldn't afford for both of us to study." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. When my grandmother finally spoke, her voice was low and dangerous. "They did what?" I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing in disbelief. All this time, I had been sacrificing everything under the illusion that I had no choice. But the choice had always been there. I had just never been told. My parents had known. They had hidden it. They had stolen it. And that truth shattered something deep inside me. Between sobs, I told her everything. The withdrawal from school, the endless shifts at the bookstore, the money sent to Daniela for books, boots, lab fees, the dismissive comments, the lack of support, the slow draining of my spirit. Words poured out of me like blood from a wound, unstoppable and vital. "Dios mío," Abuela whispered when I finally fell silent. "Your mother will answer for this. Please don't call her," I begged, suddenly afraid. "Not yet. I need to figure out what to do first." "What is there to figure out?" "You take the money, your money, and you go back to school. Immediately." It sounded so simple when she said it, but the reality was more complicated. I had withdrawn mid-semester. There would be readmission procedures, possibly penalties. And beyond the practical concerns lay deeper fears. How could I live in the same house as my parents now that I knew the truth? How could I face Daniela, knowing that my sacrifice had been built on lies? "I don't know if I can go back," I admitted, voicing my deepest fear. "What if it's too late?" "Nonsense," Abuela said firmly. "It's never too late to claim what's yours. Your grandfather didn't work 50 years in that factory for his money to go to waste. He believed in you, Eliza. He saw something special in you, even when you were a little girl collecting leaves and insects in the backyard." The mention of my grandfather, gone 5 years now, brought fresh tears. He had been my first champion, the one who bought me my first microscope, who listened patiently as I identified every tree in our neighborhood by its bark and leaves. "Call the university today," Abuela continued. "Find out what you need to do to return, and then do it. No matter what your parents say." "Where would I live?" I asked, practical concerns flooding in as the shock began to wear off. "How would I?" "The money isn't just for tuition, Carita. It's for everything you need. Rent, books, food. There's enough." I made sure of it. I looked back at my laptop screen, at the balance that had accumulated in the account. She was right. There was enough. More than enough. Especially if I kept my job at the bookstore part-time. "I can't believe they did this," I said, anger finally breaking through the hurt. How could they hide this from me? How could they let me think I had to give up everything? "People do terrible things for those they favor," Abuela said softly. "Your mother has always had a blind spot when it comes to Daniela. I had hoped she would grow out of it. But," she sighed heavily, "what matters now is what you do next." "Will you take back your life, Eliza?" I looked around my childhood bedroom, at the walls that had started to feel like a prison, at the desk where I'd spent countless hours applying for jobs that weren't what I wanted, writing cover letters that felt like compromises, at the small potted plant still reaching stubbornly for light. "Yes," I said, the word emerging stronger than I expected. "Yes, I will. That's my girl," Abuela said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Call me tonight and tell me what the university says." After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, my mind racing through implications, possibilities, plans. Then I reached for my phone again and found the business card Mrs. Thompson had given me months ago, the one I'd tucked away thinking I'd never use it. The card was worn at the edges from being carried in my wallet. I smoothed it out on my desk and dialed the number with shaking fingers. It was Sunday, and I didn't expect anyone to answer. I was prepared to leave a message, to wait until Monday for a response. But after 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "This is Linda Thompson." "Mrs. Thompson, this is Eliza Reyes. I withdrew last semester. You gave me your card." "Eliza," she sounded genuinely pleased to hear from me. "Of course I remember you. Are you calling about coming back?" "Is that still possible?" I asked, barely daring to hope. "I know it's been months, and I missed the spring semester registration deadline. It's not too late," she assured me, and those 4 words felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. "We have late registration for another week. You'd need to pay a fee, and there might be some paperwork since you formally withdrew, but it's absolutely doable. What about my program, environmental science? Would I still be able to finish this semester?" I heard keyboard clicks as she presumably checked records. "Let me see. Yes, you were nearly done. Just 2 required courses and your capstone project, right? Both of those core classes are still open for registration. You might have to take an additional elective since it's late in the game, but you could still graduate in May as planned." May. Just 4 months away. A tide of emotion rose in my chest. Hope, fear, determination all mingling into something that felt dangerously like joy. "What do I need to do first?" I asked, grabbing a pen to take notes. Mrs. Thompson outlined the process: a readmission form, which she could expedite, tuition payment, scheduling a meeting with my department advisor. Simple steps that would rebuild the bridge to my future. "Can you come to campus tomorrow?" she asked. "I can have everything ready by 10 a.m. "I'll be there," I promised. After hanging up, I opened my closet and pulled out the backpack I hadn't used since my last day of classes. It was still partially packed. A notebook, some pens, a textbook I'd forgotten to return. I emptied it, ready to fill it with new beginnings. The front door opened and closed downstairs. My parents were home from church. Soon they would call me down for the Sunday lunch that had become a ritual of silence and tension. They would ask perfunctory questions about work, remind me about Daniela's upcoming expenses. They had no idea that everything had changed. I looked at my phone, at the open bank account page showing years of hidden support. I took a screenshot, then another, documenting the truth that had been kept from me for so long. Tomorrow, I would confront them. Tomorrow, I would reclaim what was taken. But today, I needed to plan, to prepare, to protect this fragile new possibility. Outside my window, snow had begun to fall, covering the neighborhood in clean white. It felt appropriate somehow. A blank slate, a fresh start, a world made new. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope unfurling in my chest. It was tentative and tender, but it was there. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it from me. The next day, I called the university. I expected obstacles, red tape, complications. But the woman on the other end was kind, efficient. She remembered me. Within a week, I had re-enrolled. I used my grandmother's funds to pay for the reactivation fees and remaining tuition. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell Daniela. This was mine now. Just mine. That Monday morning, I woke before dawn. My parents were still asleep as I showered and dressed in clothes I hadn't worn in months. Jeans without bookstore dust, a sweater that hadn't seen the inside of the stockroom. I packed a small bag with essentials, my laptop, notebook, pens, and the flash drive containing research I'd backed up before leaving school. Just in case. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Working a double shift. Don't wait up. A lie, but one that would buy me the time I needed. My stomach twisted with nerves as I quietly closed the front door behind me. The February air bit at my cheeks as I walked to the bus stop, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing ahead to campus, to Mrs. Thompson's office, to the possibility of reclaiming what I'd lost. The university looked exactly the same, yet somehow different. Students hurried across the quad, bundled against the cold, their faces showing the typical Monday morning reluctance. None of them knew what it was like to have this taken away. None of them understood the miracle of an ordinary school day. Mrs. Thompson was waiting for me, a stack of forms on her desk and a genuine smile on her face. "I pulled some strings," she said without preamble. "Got you into Professor Williams' Advanced Ecological Systems class, even though it technically closed last week. And Dr. Patel agreed to work with you on your capstone. He remembered your proposal from last semester and was quite disappointed when you left." The kindness in her efficiency nearly broke me. I had been so alone for so long that this simple act of someone caring enough to help felt overwhelming. "Thank you," I managed, taking the seat across from her desk. "Now," she said, pushing the forms toward me, "let's get you officially back where you belong." I signed my name, this time with steady hands, on readmission forms, class registrations, and financial documents. With each signature, I felt something inside me straighten, like a plant finally turning toward the sun. "What about housing?" Mrs. Thompson asked as I completed the last form. "Are you commuting from home?" I hesitated. I hadn't fully formed a plan yet, but I knew I couldn't go back to that house every day. Couldn't sit across the dinner table from the people who had stolen my future so callously. "Actually, I was hoping you might know of any last-minute housing options, on or off campus." She frowned thoughtfully. "On campus is full for the semester, but..." She pulled out a campus directory and flipped through it. "Sarah Okafor in Student Services keeps a list of local rentals that work with mid-semester students. International transfers, mostly, but your situation certainly qualifies as special circumstances." By afternoon, I had viewed 3 apartments and signed a lease for the smallest, a studio above a laundromat near the edge of campus. It was tiny, with peeling paint in the bathroom, and a kitchenette barely big enough for a mini fridge and hot plate. But it had a large window that faced east, perfect for my plant, and more importantly, it was mine. The rent would take a significant chunk of my savings each month. But between Abuela's money and my bookstore job, I could make it work. Mr. Fordham was surprisingly understanding when I called to reduce my hours. "Always thought you were meant for more than shelving books," he said. "Keep your weekend shifts if you want them. The extra cash will help with ramen, at least." I spent that night in a motel near campus, not ready to face my parents, not ready to move into the empty apartment. I called Abuela to update her, and she insisted on sending additional money for furnishings. "A bed, at least," she said. "You can't sleep on the floor like a college freshman." "I am a college student," I reminded her, smiling despite everything. "A senior," she corrected. "Nearly a graduate. That deserves a proper bed." The next day was a blur of cheap furniture stores, discount home goods, and dollar store necessities. By evening, my apartment had the basics: a futon that doubled as a couch, a small table with 2 chairs I'd found on clearance, dishes from Goodwill, and linens that were scratchy but clean. It wasn't much, but as I sat on my new futon that night, watching the streetlights come on outside my window, I felt a profound sense of peace. My phone had been buzzing all day with texts and calls from my parents, escalating in urgency. I had responded only once, with a simple message: "I'm safe. We'll explain soon." Now, as I prepared for my first classes the next day, I turned my phone off completely. They would have to wait. I needed this time to find my footing, to remember who I was before they had taken so much from me. That first week back at school was both exhilarating and terrifying. I felt like an imposter at times, watching the other students who had progressed normally through their studies while I had been shelving books and sending money to Daniela. They seemed so confident, so certain of their place in the world. I found myself sitting in the back of classrooms, afraid to speak up at first. But the material, the actual content of my courses, came rushing back like muscle memory. In ecological systems, Professor Williams posed a question about watershed management that no one could answer. Before I knew what was happening, my hand was in the air, and I was explaining the interconnected factors that affected drought resilience in riparian zones. The professor paused, eyebrows raised. "Welcome back, Ms. Reyes," he said simply, and continued with the lecture. But that small acknowledgement, that recognition that I belonged here, settled something in me. I wasn't an imposter. This was where I was meant to be. By the end of the week, I had reconnected with a few former classmates, though I kept the details of my absence vague. Family issues, I would say with a shrug if anyone asked. Most didn't push for more information. Emily, my old lab partner, was the exception. You disappeared," she said when she cornered me after class on Thursday. Like, completely vanished. "I thought you might be dead in a ditch somewhere." I couldn't help but laugh at her characteristic bluntness. Not dead, just temporarily misplaced. She studied me with the same intense focus she applied to field samples. "There's more to it than that." "There is," I admitted. "But I'm not ready to talk about it yet," she nodded, accepting this boundary with surprising grace. "Well, when you are ready, I've got beer in my fridge and absolutely no judgmental tendencies whatsoever." "That's a lie. You judge everyone." "True, but I'm still a good listener." It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. We made plans to meet for coffee the following week, and as I watched her walk away, I realized how much I had missed these connections, these relationships built on shared passion rather than obligation. My professors welcomed me back with varying degrees of warmth. Most were supportive, offering extra office hours to help me catch up on anything I'd missed. Dr. Patel, my capstone advisor, was particularly enthusiastic about having me back on his research team. "Your project outline was one of the most promising I'd seen," he told me during our first meeting. "Assessing microplastic contamination in urban water systems. It's exactly the kind of practical application work we need more of in the field." His validation swept away the last of my doubts. I had not been deluding myself all these years. My work was valuable. My passion was legitimate. All the dismissive comments from Daniela, all the redirected focus from my parents, none of it reflected reality. The weekend came, and with it, my first shift back at Fordham Books. There was comfort in the familiar routine of straightening shelves and helping customers find the perfect read. Mr. Fordham had saved my favorite closing shift for me. Saturday nights were quiet, giving me ample time to study between customers. "How's the apartment?" he asked as I tied on my apron. "It's small but functional," I replied. "Kind of like a ship's cabin. Everything has its place or it feels chaotic." He nodded approvingly. "Good discipline for a scientist. Order amid chaos." That night, after locking up the store, I didn't take the bus home to my parents' house as I had for months. Instead, I walked the opposite direction, toward my own small space, my own life. The streets were quiet, the winter air sharp but refreshing. For the first time in a long time, I felt the future stretching out before me, uncertain but full of possibilities that were mine to choose. It was hard balancing coursework with part-time jobs, but it was my hard. It came with meaning, not resentment. Every day I stepped onto campus, I walked a little taller. I wasn't just reclaiming my education. I was reclaiming myself, piece by piece, assignment by assignment, decision by decision. As I unlocked the door to my apartment that night, I realized I still hadn't faced my parents. That confrontation loomed, inevitable and necessary. But tonight, surrounded by my textbooks, my notes, my small but significant independence, I allowed myself to simply be. The storm would come soon enough. For now, this moment of rebuilding was enough. Eventually, the truth came out. My mother called me, furious. "How dare you go behind our backs? Do you think you're better than your sister?" My father echoed her anger. Daniela was silent. I let them speak. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." It happened on a Sunday, 2 weeks after I'd moved into my apartment. I had finally turned my phone back on, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. There were 37 missed calls, 56 text messages, and a voicemail from my father that simply said, "Come home. Now." Instead of calling, I decided to face them in person. One final visit to collect the rest of my belongings and say what needed to be said. I chose Sunday afternoon deliberately, a time when I knew they'd all be home, when Daniela would be video calling from Boston, when there would be nowhere for any of us to hide. The bus ride to my parents' house felt surreal. I watched familiar neighborhoods pass by the window, streets I'd known all my life, and yet everything looked different. Perhaps I was the one who had changed. My key still worked in the front door. I stepped into the house that had been my prison for months, breathing in the familiar scent of my mother's Sunday cooking. For a moment, My resolve wavered. There was comfort in the known, even when the known was painful. "Eliza?" My mother appeared in the hallway, dish towel in hand, her expression a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." "I've been at school," I said simply. "Where I belong." Her face changed, confusion replacing concern. "What are you talking about? You withdrew. You're working at the bookstore." "I re-enrolled 2 weeks ago. I'm back in the environmental science program, finishing my degree. I'll graduate in May." My father emerged from the living room, his familiar frown deepening as he heard my words. "With what money?" "We can't afford—" "With Abuela's money," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "The money she's been sending for my education since freshman year. The money you've been hiding from me." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw clenched so tightly I could see a muscle twitch beneath his stubbled cheek. From the living room came the tinny sound of Daniela's voice through the laptop speaker. "What's going on? Is Eliza there?" "Put the camera on her." My mother moved mechanically to the living room, carrying the laptop so Daniela could see me. My sister's face filled the screen, her expression unreadable. "You knew?" she asked, and for once, there was no smirk, no dismissive tone. "About Abuela's money? I just found out. She called me, wondering why I wasn't using it." I looked directly at my parents. "She thought I knew. She thought you had told me, as you promised her you would. We were going to—" my mother began, but her defense sounded hollow even to her own ears. She tried again. "We were saving it. For later. For when—" "For when what? Mom? For when Daniela finished medical school? For when you decided my education was finally worth investing in? After I'd spent years working retail while my sister got everything handed to her." "That's not fair," my father cut in. "Your sister has exceptional potential. She's going to be a doctor." "And what am I?" I asked. The question that had silently haunted me for months finally spoken aloud. What was I to you, besides Daniela's financial backup plan? Neither of them answered. In their silence, I found my confirmation. I had never been the protagonist in their story. I had been a plot device, a supporting character whose purpose was to further my sister's narrative. "How dare you go behind our backs?" my mother finally said, anger replacing her initial shock. "Do you think you're better than your sister? After everything we've done for you? Done for me?" I almost laughed. "You stole from me. You lied to me. You took my future and gave it to her because you decided hers mattered more." "That's not true," my father insisted, but he couldn't meet my eyes. "It is true," I said quietly. "And the worst part is, you still don't see anything wrong with what you did." From the laptop, Daniela's voice cut through the tension. "I didn't know, Eliza. About the money, I swear." I looked at my sister's face on the screen, searching for signs of the girl I had grown up with, the one I had played with and fought with and loved before all of this. Was she telling the truth? Did it even matter anymore? "Maybe you didn't," I conceded. "But you knew I withdrew from school for you. You knew I was working to help pay your expenses, and you took it all without a second thought. Someone like you shouldn't even be in college. Remember? That's what you said to me the night before I had to sign those withdrawal papers." She flinched, recognition flashing in her eyes. "I didn't mean—" "You did mean it," I said, no longer angry, just tired. "You've always believed you deserved more, and they've always believed it too." I turned away from the screen, from the sister who had been placed on a pedestal so high neither of us could reach the other anymore. I faced my parents instead, these people who had raised me but failed to see me. "I've moved out," I told them, my voice flat. "I have an apartment near campus. I came to get the rest of my things." "This is ridiculous," my father exploded. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "I'm 22 years old. The money is legally mine. Abuela confirmed it with her lawyer. You have no right to it, and no right to stop me." "We're your parents," my mother said, as if that simple fact trumped all else. "Yes, you are, and you failed me." The words hung in the air between us, painful but necessary. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I walked past them, up to my childhood bedroom. The small suitcase I'd brought was enough for the clothes and personal items I still wanted. Most of my books and research materials were already at my apartment, smuggled out over the past 2 weeks during brief visits when I knew they wouldn't be home. As I packed, I could hear them arguing downstairs, my father's raised voice, my mother's tearful responses, Daniela's tinny interjections from the laptop. They were trying to decide how to handle me, what strategy might bring me back in line. They didn't understand that there was no going back. Not after what they had done. Not after what I had discovered about myself in the process. I came downstairs with my suitcase, pausing in the living room where they had fallen silent at my approach. On the coffee table sat a framed family photo from my high school graduation. All 4 of us smiling, my arms around Daniela's shoulders, my parents standing proud behind us. A moment frozen in time, before everything fractured. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said, softness finally entering my voice. "I'm doing this because I deserve to finish what I started. I deserve a chance at my own dreams, not just supporting someone else's." "You can do both," my mother pleaded. "Live here, go to school, be part of this family." I shook my head. "Not anymore. You broke something when you lied to me, when you took my choice away. I can forgive you someday, but I can't live with you. Not now." "So that's it?" my father asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "You're just walking away from your family." "I'm not the one who walked away first," I replied, the truth simple and painful. "You did that when you decided I was worth sacrificing." After that, the call stopped. The silence was heavy at first, but liberating. I no longer lived under their shadow. I had made peace with the fact that I could love my family from afar, without sacrificing myself in the process. I visited my grandmother often. She became my anchor, reminding me that love can be quiet, steady, and life-saving. Weeks passed. February melted into March, and March bloomed into April. The campus came alive with spring, and so did I. My coursework consumed me in the best possible way. My capstone research yielded promising results. Dr. Patel suggested I consider graduate programs, handing me brochures for master's degrees in environmental management and conservation biology. "And you have the mind for it," he said during an advising session. "And the passion. Don't let it go to waste." I tucked the brochures away, not ready to think that far ahead yet. One step at a time. Finish this degree first, heal this wound first. Emily became a regular presence in my life again, bringing me coffee during late study sessions, lending me books, inviting me to potluck dinners with other students from our department. Slowly, I built a community that valued me for exactly who I was. On a warm day in late April, I was crossing the quad when I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the science building. Daniela. My steps faltered, then continued. She stood as I approached, nervousness evident in her posture. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not unkindly, just surprised. "Spring break," she said. "And I wanted to see you." We stood awkwardly, sisters made strangers by betrayal and distance. She looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes, suggesting the rigors of pre-med weren't treating her kindly. "How did you know where to find me?" I finally asked. "Your friend at the bookstore, Mr. Fordham. He told me your class schedule." She offered a tentative smile. "He made me promise I wasn't here to mess with your head before he'd tell me anything." That sounded like him. I almost smiled back, but caught myself. "Why are you here, Daniela?" She took a deep breath. "To apologize. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what you said. About what I said to you that night." She looked down at her hands, twisting her class ring nervously. "I was cruel and selfish, and I didn't understand what I was taking from you." Her words held the ring of truth, but they couldn't bridge the chasm between us overnight. Too much had been broken. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. "It means something." We sat on the bench, a careful distance between us, and talked. Really talked. Perhaps for the first time in years. About her struggles in Boston, about my research, about the family fracture that had left us all adrift in different ways. She had fought with our parents too, she told me. After learning the full extent of what they had done. "They still don't understand," she said, frustration evident in her voice. They think they were doing what was best for the family. They were doing what was best for you, I corrected gently. There's a difference. She nodded, acceptance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I know that now. As she prepared to leave, to catch her train back to Boston, she hesitated. Will you ever come home again? I thought about the little apartment that had become my sanctuary, about the campus that had welcomed me back, about the future that was finally my own. I am home, I told her, but maybe someday I'll visit. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door left slightly ajar rather than slammed shut. It was the beginning of a new kind of relationship, built on truth rather than obligation. Now, I work with conservation teams in rural communities, helping protect what remains of the natural world. My days are long, filled with travel, research, and the kind of joy that comes from doing something that matters. Sometimes I still feel that ache, the one that wonders how different life could have been if only I had been supported from the start. The path from graduation to where I am today wasn't straight or simple. I remember the morning of commencement like it was yesterday, the weight of the gown on my shoulders, the cap that wouldn't quite stay put no matter how many bobby pins I used. My tiny apartment had been filled with morning light as I got ready, the small potted plant from Professor Martinez's greenhouse now thriving on my windowsill, a reminder of how much growth can happen even after neglect. My grandmother arrived the day before, staying in the spare room of Emily's apartment since mine was barely big enough for one. She had brought me a gift, a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a leaf. It was your grandfather's first gift to me, she explained as she fastened it around my neck. He saved for 3 months to buy it, back when we were younger than you are now. I touched the pendant, feeling the connection to a past that had helped secure my future. I wish he could be here, I said softly. He is, querida, Abuela replied, her eyes crinkling with a bittersweet smile. He would be so proud of you. Not just for graduating, but for standing up for yourself, for refusing to disappear. I graduated with honors. My name was called in front of hundreds, and I walked the stage with my head held high. My grandmother was in the front row, clapping with tears in her eyes. I didn't see my parents there, and that was okay. This victory was not for them. It was for the girl who signed her withdrawal papers in tears, and for the woman who refused to stay broken. Daniela was there, though. She had come without telling me, slipping into a seat near the back. I only saw her afterward, as graduates and families mingled on the lawn. She approached hesitantly, holding a small wrapped package. "Congratulations," she said, offering the gift. "You earned this." Inside was a compass, old-fashioned and beautiful, with an inscription on the back, "Find your own way." It was a peace offering of sorts, an acknowledgement of the separate paths we were now on. I hugged her, briefly, but genuinely. We weren't close again. Perhaps we never would be. But the sharp edges of betrayal had begun to soften. We were learning to exist in each other's orbits, without colliding, without one eclipsing the other. My parents sent a card. Just a card, with a generic congratulations message and their signatures. No personal note, no recognition of the journey. I kept it anyway, tucked in the back of my graduation album, a reminder of how far I'd come. After graduation came the job search. I had expected it to be difficult, had prepared myself for rejection and compromise, but Dr. Patel's recommendation opened doors I hadn't even known existed. 3 interviews led to 2 offers, and by the end of summer, I had packed my few belongings into a second-hand car and driven west, toward a position with the Sierra Nevada Conservation Trust. The work was more physically demanding than I had anticipated. Days spent hiking through forests, wading into streams to collect samples, meeting with local farmers and landowners to discuss sustainable practices. My hands grew calloused, my skin tanned despite the sunscreen I diligently applied. I learned to identify bird calls, to read subtle signs of watershed health, to negotiate with skeptical community members who viewed environmental scientists as threats to their livelihoods. I shared a small house with 2 other junior researchers, Katie and Marcus. We split rent and chores, helped each other with field work, and spent evenings on our rickety porch discussing research findings and career aspirations. They became my second family, one built on shared passion rather than obligation. You're different from most first years. Katie observed one night, as we sat watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. More certain. Like you've already faced down your biggest fears and nothing in the field can scare you now. I laughed, but there was truth in her words. Nothing in the challenges of my work, not the physical exhaustion, not the grant rejections, not the political resistance to environmental protections, compared to the feeling of having my future stolen and having to reclaim it piece by piece. That first year in the field taught me more than any classroom ever had. I learned resilience from watching forests recover after wildfires. I learned patience from monitoring slow but steady improvements in water quality. I learned courage from communities fighting to protect their natural resources against powerful interests. I called Abuela every Sunday, updating her on my projects, listening to her stories about Arizona's desert wildlife. She had become a volunteer at a local botanical garden, guiding tours and teaching visitors about native plants. We're both scientist educators now, she would say proudly. My parents and I maintained a careful distance. Birthday calls, holiday cards, occasional text messages. The fracture remained, neither fully healed nor completely broken. Perhaps it would always be that way. Some injuries leave permanent scars, reminders of where we've been and what we've survived. Daniela surprised me by becoming a more consistent presence in my life. Not close, but present. She switched her focus from general medicine to environmental health during her second year, a change she explained in a long email that acknowledged how my work had influenced her thinking. There's no point treating patients if we're not also treating the planet they live on, she wrote. I think I always dismissed your field because I was jealous of your certainty, your clear purpose. I never had that. I just knew medicine was what everyone expected from me. Her words gave me a new perspective on our shared past. Perhaps we had both been victims of our parents' expectations in different ways. Me through neglect, her through pressure. It didn't excuse what had happened, but it helped me understand it better. 3 years into my career, I received an unexpected opportunity, a fellowship to lead a conservation project in Monteverde, Costa Rica. A year studying cloud forest ecosystems and implementing sustainability practices with local communities. It was the kind of opportunity that could define a career, open doors to international work, maybe even lead to graduate studies at institutions I had once considered far beyond my reach. I accepted without hesitation. The night before I left for Costa Rica, I found myself sitting on the floor of my bedroom, laptop open to my email. I was staring at a draft message addressed to my parents, trying to find the right words to tell them about this new chapter in my life. After multiple attempts, I settled on simplicity. I wanted you to know I've accepted a fellowship in Costa Rica. I'll be there for a year, starting next week. My contact information is below. I'm excited about this opportunity. I hope you're both well. Their response came the next morning, just before my flight. We're proud of you, Eliza. Be safe, keep in touch. Simple, like mine. But the words, proud of you, hit me with unexpected force. Too little, too late in many ways. And yet, something. Now, 2 months into my work in Monteverde, I find myself surrounded by a world of such stunning beauty it sometimes takes my breath away. The mist rolling through ancient trees, the calls of resplendent quetzals at dawn, the vibrant communities working to protect their natural heritage, all of it fills me with purpose and joy. My small research cabin sits on the edge of the forest, simple but comfortable. At night, I often sit on the porch, listening to the symphony of insects and frogs, watching fireflies create constellations at ground level. Sometimes I reread my acceptance letter, still saved in a folder on my laptop, not because I need proof I belonged, but because it reminds me of the moment I took my power back. But then I remember, I'm not here despite what happened. I'm here because I chose to rise from it, because I reclaimed my story. I no longer shrink to make others comfortable. I no longer wait for permission to exist fully. Yesterday, I received an email from a university in California inquiring about my interest in their doctoral program in conservation biology. Your work in Costa Rica has not gone unnoticed, the department chair wrote. We believe you would be an excellent candidate for our program. As I contemplated this new possibility, I realized how far I've come from that devastated girl in the university administration office. The The future stretches before me now, full of possibilities I create rather than permissions I seek. Sometimes when I'm deep in the forest, collecting samples or mapping habitats, I feel a profound sense of belonging to the earth, to my work, to myself. There's a certain peace in knowing that the hardest choice I ever made, to reclaim my life when others tried to take it, was also the most necessary one. This life is mine now. This path, with all its challenges and triumphs, belongs to me. I carved it out when the easier route would have been to disappear, to accept the role others had written for me. Every day, with mud on my boots and purpose in my heart, I choose it again, and I won't let anyone take it away again.